Hey, you've summoned a lesser maker. When playing a skirmish game, verticality is really important. Here on this channel, I make Mordheim terrain. In a ruined city, verticality has a lot of opportunity to make some really tall structures. And I really love this build, but there's not a ton of playability because everything's inside the build. Let me show you my favorite. In a lot of skirmish games, not just Mordheim, like climbing, falling, jumping, doesn't get used a ton. A board like this, those rules are unavoidable and anything could happen. I think I need to take some lessons learned here and apply it to my Morheim fortress board. This is my Morheim fortress board. It's got a giant castle. On this side, a goblin village I made last time with miscast, which has been kind of a dream that I never thought would happen. And today we're going to be adding to the graveyard section of this build. I wanted to add a giant pillar to kind of build off of and expand onto the fortress. The way I do that is I build out a block of foam, and I honestly kind of glued this one messily together. So I sanded it before I really heavily textured it with a lump of concrete, and then I punched in the bricks with a rectangle punch that I made out of a paintbrush. The way to make this look really good is I'm making sure to put two of the edges inside of the groove that I've made previously. That way the grout line isn't being doubled up and these bricks look like they're being laid one on top of the other. And before you know it, you have a pillar ready to be placed. I cut out a space of it from the base, and then I glued it in with some expanding foam. And this doesn't just glue it in place because it's a really good foam adhesive, but it also fills in all the gaps. And I also filled in the pillar itself to give it a bit more stability internally. After that, I just had to connect the fortress to the pillar, and I did that with an archway, kind of like I did last time. And I heavily textured it, I laid out the bricks, and then I glued that in. I wanted this to look like a giant crane to kind of resemble that this fortress has been kind of ramshackly built and unfinished before the Mordheim comet hit the city. After the comet, my headcanon for this section of the build is an executioner has kind of taken refuge inside of this tower to kind of mark it as his territory. He's draping his victims all over this. So I made a bunch of these L brackets. If you don't want to scratch build these, I've also made an STL. And I also scratch built a wheel. I do have an STL of that as well. But those are free on Patreon if you're interested. If you need any help tracking those STLs down, feel free to message me and I'm happy to do so. Once I had all these made, it was easy enough to kind of make the scaffolding, just glue them right in, make some nooses out of pipe cleaner. And I'm just doing that by twisting a loop and then kind of coiling that loop in. Pipe cleaners are a really good representation of rope from this scale. And because I magnet my boards to the wall, having a rope substitute with an armature in it will allow it to keep its shape and not dry and hang at a weird angle. After that, I grabbed some popsicle sticks and then I trimmed them to size and then just hot glued them in wherever I wanted a platform. This is about as easy as it gets. You can texture these popsicle sticks too, but oftentimes I can get away with doing it with paint. My Patreon is backwards, so I want to support your hobby, so I provide free STLs and a bunch of other free stuff. So if that sounds good to you, feel free to go check it out. I just want to take a second to thank my Patreon members. Thank you guys so much. The monthly magazine for the Patreon just came out. I'm really happy with how this one looks. So Thank you so much. One of the articles for the magazine is for a build challenge called Entmoot. This has been created by PMC Illustrations on Instagram. And basically you go outside, find a stick, and you make a tree spirit. Since my wife has a Dryad warband, I was kind of going for a Pocahontas Mother Willow theme for this, but obviously it had to be grimdark, so I sculpted a skull. And I did this with half green stuff, half air dry clay. I sculpted in a bark texture. I got back to the build. I used some giant jewelry chain for this pillar, and inspired by this artwork, I thought it would be cool to have a statue. So I went through my miniatures and I found this dragon, and I think if I put this on a platform or a bit of a base, it might be a really cool like Mordheim crow. So I swapped the head out with a giant crow head, and I don't know, I feel like this looks really Bloodborne, and I think it looks pretty cool. So I wrapped a noose around it to kind of go with the rest of the theme, and I just kind of weaved it in and out. After this, I coated all the foam with some PVA glue and black paint. I added some hanged men. I thought this was a really cool touch. I was able to use some 3D prints that I printed out right before I started the YouTube channel, and that was pretty satisfying. And then I went outside and spray painted everything because the PVA glue doesn't really stick to hot glue. To paint the brick, I started with kind of a medium brown up to kind of a golden brown to mimic limestone. Then I painted all the wood a gray blue to really look like a dried out dead wood. And then for all the brass colors, I started with a dark green on the lower half and then a lighter green on the top half, and just kind of wet blended everything together. I use dollar store paints, so it really doesn't muddy up the texture too much. It'll dry pretty evenly. And then I doused everything with a dark black brown wash in a spray bottle. And that's how it looks. And I'm super stoked with how this board is looking. It's super playable. There's a lot of surface area, and it's just going to be such a really dense looking board. I'm looking forward to seeing what you guys think in the comments. If you could, please do leave a comment, because a video performs twice as good just depending on how many comments it gets. And it helps me out a lot. So thank you so much. Don't forget to like and subscribe too. Check out the Patreon for free stuff. And if you find value in it, it's real cheap to sign up. Check out the magazine too in the shop tab. I think I'll leave you there. Thank you so much for watching. Have a good one.